Uh, Welcome and thanks for your patience. We're just waiting to start the live stream to like officially start, which should happen in a minute or so. So thanks for waiting. Okay, we're live.
That's
This is
that's
called
very
delay.
meta.
Okay,
That's so weird.
I will take this away. Okay. So welcome to Elisava for this second critical feature talk. Series of hybrid events, interviews, and an upcoming podcast that will feature or is featuring a set of eclectic perspectives, mostly from faculty members of the Master in Design for Responsible AI, which is a program started by Elisava and the organization, the Creative Research Lab that I co-direct called IAM, where in this series we're exploring the intersection of responsible AI, of media and design in a state of climate emergency. So um, last January 30, we started this series with the researcher and writer Xiaowei Wang. We will soon publish the recording of this first lecture. And Today we are very excited to have here in Barcelona with us Nadia Piet, the founder of AIxDESIGN. And just wanted to invite you to give a warm welcome to Nadia. Welcome, Nadia. And if you have questions, we will have time for questions after the presentation. We will also have a couple guests on stage from the community and from the master. And I hope that you enjoy the session today. Thanks for being here. So the screen and the mic are yours, Nadia.
I'm just projecting. Great. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you and nice to be here in Barcelona in general, but also that this master exists. And I always wanted to go to Elisava years back, so it's like cool to be here now on, so, like through a different way. But we made it. Yeah, so Andres asked me to speak a little bit about, I don't know, our work, I guess, our point of view, and in the context of, critical futures. I'll just share thoughts and ramble and sort of rant. That's what I usually like do. And I'll try to keep it short. So then we have time for like questions or discussion, or, I'm really curious why you're here and what your interests are and so on. Also, people at home on the live stream, I don't know which angle you see me, but yeah, would love to continue the conversation after. So I called my talk on AI Beyond Big Tech Imaginaries, which I now found out like, maybe there is a way to summarize our work in just a few words. But just brief introduction for people who don't know me. So my name is Nadia Piet. I generally refer to myself as a designer and researcher, but honestly I'm like a classic slashy person that does many things and always struggling to find like the umbrella terms for that. So that's the ones I've settled for. It's a lot of, my favorite thing to do is just basically going in a rabbit hole, learning new things, and then coming back to the surface with like souvenirs of stuff I found and like insights or my interpretation of things. I call that research, but it's not necessarily by like academic or scientific standards, but a much more chaotic approach and playful as well. So I'm the founder and now creative lead of AIxDESIGN, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a second, what that is. And I did my also a master's myself in data-driven design over lockdown, because after a few years of thinking and talking about AI, I decided I have to learn to write some Python. And I did, and that was so fun. And when I'm not on a computer, which is not that much, I love being online on the web. Usually either on a mat, a yoga mat, in class or in front, or like diving underwater, generally stationed in Amsterdam, but it's nice to be here this whole week. So that's me, and that's just like my hyper, yes, online nerd. You know, just like classic 90s kid, like writing HTML when I was 6 because I wanted Hello Kitty on a page. You know, one of those. And just a really brief like timeline of sort of my work in AI, I guess. So I've done a lot of different things before that, mostly like surface design, UX design, strategic design, like the design that, but not necessarily like graphic or visual, more like systems and experiences. And then in 2018, you know, there was a lot happening around AI, not as much as now, but stuff was happening. And I was really interested in like, what does that mean for, say, like my role as a designer, and the other way around. So kind of felt like at the time, those worlds were pretty, you know, separate. And I was like, oh, what's the role of like AI in shaping like design or creative practices? Like what's going to happen there or what's happening there? How can it be like a creative tool? And also the other way around, like what's the role of like designers in the broadest sense, which, you know, there's a million things at this point, in say like shaping AI or the way we think about AI. So started with those questions, made this toolkit, released it online as like a PDF. People cared about it. Cool. So things started like happening. It turns out I was not the only one with this curiosity, but also like this need and this urgency to figure those things out. And so I started, just like working in that space more. And then also realized that I couldn't, I don't know, find that many people in like at that intersection. So either I had like more like coding engineer friends, and then I had to sort of, you know, explain my interest in, I don't know, like user needs or affordances and like what those things are, or like design friends that really got, you know, those elements of things, but then I had to explain to them what like a confusion matrix or like recall and precision are. And so I was like, I don't know who to talk to, like, cause, you know, I wanted to nerd out on my stuff and couldn't find so many people. So what do? You know, it's 21st century, you go online and you say, hey, are there more, you know, people like this? And that's kind of how the AIxDESIGN community was born. It was just started as like a Slack channel, like, hey, we're in here discussing this stuff. And then that has kind of, I don't know, like evolved into what we are now, which I guess I would describe as a, like still a global community, like online community, just exchanging like ideas and, knowledge and experiences, but also we're now like a, I don't know, decentralized like design and research studio doing like projects of our own or with partners to also sort of explore these like same questions with the people from the community. So then 2022, we, you know, people in the Slack were like, oh, we'd like to do some events about this, some events, and just things started sort of like happening. Yeah, we did some events, we wrote some blogs. I don't know, it just all happened very organically. Started taking up a lot of time. So then we were like, hey, maybe we should like get a bit more organized. And so we ran a few programs then that were sort of like, you know, we tried to do things like, run a program more organized. We did like a design for data rights with the ICO, data hacktivism with Abdo, who's also part of the faculty and frequent collaborator. And AI Playground, which was a lot around actually exploring like AI within creative practice. And this was just like a year or something before things, you know, blew up. So things were very hacky and DIY. You know, this was still like StyleGAN 2 and I don't know, like GPT-2, and things were very buggy. And with that, actually very fun and playful. And we loved, you know, exploring that. But then 2023 happened, and this was how we felt. It was weird, like us, you know, like we were for years sort of in this space, and then suddenly it's like AI and design sort of exploded to the masses, and we didn't really, I don't know, it was like strange. Everyone was like so hyped, and you know, we were always talking a lot about like the sort of more critical sides of things, and it felt like that got no airtime. And so we were sort of left in like we were left feeling weird. I don't know, maybe like, how people felt when like Nirvana became mainstream or something. But then also with this, we were like, guys, like bias, it's a problem. And people were like, oh, this is so cool. So yeah, we felt like this, and we didn't really know what to do. We had very mixed feelings about like working in AI in general, and like, God, is there any way to be, I don't know, like constructive in this space in an industry that feels like quite convoluted. And then yeah, the tech bros, yeah. So a very specific like ideology and language and narratives like started to evolve around AI. They were always there, but like they just became so like prominent, and we didn't really, sign up for, like, we just don't really subscribe to those. So we were like, oh God, like where does that leave us? Before we were just sort of like having fun and doing weird stuff, and now feels like we were in a completely different landscape. So we had to like sort of resituate ourselves. And so now we're, I don't know, that took a while, just being like, oh God, I don't know what to do. And we, spoke a lot with the community, and we realized that there is, actually very much a need for sort of like a community first or like a more participatory way of exploring these things. On the one hand, we feel like there's big tech and, the structures of that and the ideologies and so on, incentives of that, developing our thinking around AI and quite like dominating it actually. And on the other hand, there's like a super thoughtful, like lots of work happening in academia as well, and like research. But we felt like there was something sort of missing maybe in the middle that's more like democratized, more participatory. So that's where we sort of sit now, I think, like developing community first narratives and approaches to AI and kind of like figuring out what that means. And we're also exploring this idea of like slow AI, question mark, yet to, figure out what that is, but we'll come to that. And so just three sort of, I don't know, like ideas or quotes that I think guide a lot of our work. Is this like Silicon Valley's most powerful monopoly, maybe how we perceive technology. So not only the stack, like the infrastructure, the capital, but also just like how we conceptualize and are even, sort of wrapping our heads around technology and what we think it's capable of and who we think it's for. And so we think we can like reclaim that in a way, and figure out what it means for us, what we want it to mean for us. Love this quote by Octavia Butler, where she says, "There's nothing new under the sun, but there's new suns." I very much doubt that this was about technology. But for me, it gets at this idea of, AI is like replicating a lot of problems and systems that we see elsewhere. Like a lot of the problems with AI aren't necessarily unique to that, right? They're mirrored in other aspects of society. But we do think there's also value in looking at things in new ways, like taking a different perspective, a different point of view, shining a new light on things. Maybe we can see, have new ways of like perceiving it, and then hopefully maybe designing it or working with it, or choosing not to. But yeah, this idea of like invoking sort of new perspectives. And then this is an important one by Rua Benjamin. Remember to imagine and craft the worlds you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the ones you cannot live within. So there's a lot of critique around AI, and I'm very grateful for that work. But I also think there's a step that comes after that is very difficult, and I'm not seeing as much of. So it's like, in addition to critiquing what we don't want, what do we want? I don't know, but I think it's an important question to ask and try to, shape or explore together. So sort of beyond the critique. And so we do a lot of like making stuff and trying stuff and doing stuff. Some of it more successful than others, but you know, very much trying to do things rather than, yeah, only critique, which also I think other people are better at than we are. So we build on the critiques and then like, so what, now what, then what? Sort of how we, I don't know, how we work. We believe in this idea of like plurality, so being like one of many and being a platform for ideas or thoughts or people to meet. Love this like very early generated DALL-E image by Ploy that is so chaotic, like visual depiction of our community and just people being sort of scrambled all over the place. But yeah, we really value like different backgrounds, diversity of thought, but also expressions, right? Like who gets to decide like what is good, good research or good thinking or good ways of expressing that. Like we love like meme academia and those ways of, you know, like expressing ideas. We believe in like working in the open, so literally everything we do is like somewhere online. We're still working on a good website, which will come soon, because right now you'll have a hard time finding those things, as is often a problem with like open sourcing and the maintenance of online resources. But yeah, everything we do, all the research, whatever, we just want to like throw it into the world so other people can like build on it, right? We're like trying to do the opposite of gatekeeping and just throwing everything out there. If it's useful for someone, please run with it. So if you need a resource, you know, there's probably a link somewhere. But we believe in, yeah, that idea of like democratizing access and literacy, of what we sort of like do together. And then this idea of protopia, which is kind of what I said before, is like not really thinking of like utopias or dystopias or this quite like binary perspective that I think people often have in tech, and specifically like sort of, I don't know, more mainstream discourse. It's like very hype or like anti-hype. How can we have slightly more like nuanced conversations and questions and think of, yeah, like protopia. So it's like, how can we sort of build the tomorrows we want? Like what are those preferable ones, and what's our agency in sort of bringing them into being? Even if it's like small things, like we believe, like we're very focused on that space where we can actually do and make things. So that's a lot of like how and why and abstract. I'll talk a little bit about like some projects that we did. So like, cool, so what do we do? What does that look like? And I wanted to show this video, but let's see if it works. It works. Do we have sound? We have sound. Okay, so this is like a little show reel that Dominica edited. And I'll just talk a bit over it. So we did last year together with Submarine Channel. They're like a film production house. We did like an artist residency to figure out AI. What the hell should we do with that? And like specifically generative AI, what is like the potential, but also those frictions in using it in specifically like animation and filmmaking. But I think the sort of, yeah, tensions we uncovered like ring true for storytelling in like more broader terms. And so it was really, again, it was about like sort of transcending this like, oh, it's really amazing, like sick, we can now do these things, which yes, we agree, it's pretty cool. But, you know, and on the other side, it's like, no, to AI art, like anything generated is, you know, complete like crap. We felt like there were a lot of perspectives and questions to ask in the middle of that. And so we worked with 6 creative technologists and 6 like filmmakers and had them work in pairs to kind of figure, like tease out these tensions of, you know, how does it actually feel in the creative process to like work with these AI tools. what do we like, what do we not like, what are like the feelings more than actually the output. And so we did like a bunch of experiments with them. We ran like workshops and really had a lot of just chats about how they were experiencing this like process. And we made this like big report, which if you're interested, you can find and read. It's, online. And also all of their like workflows. So like, how did we actually make this, right? Like breaking down the workflows, and just reflecting on, how we feel about it. And a lot of thoughts came out of that, which I'm not going to go into now. Another project we did was together with Better Images of AI. I don't know if anyone knows the project, but it's basically working off this premise that most of the like visual depictions around AI are incredibly stereotypical at best, and like completely wrong and misleading. It's like the classic like humanoids. It's always like blue and silver. I don't know. There's like flying mats around. I don't know. They're just not necessarily helpful, nor are they like aesthetically, interesting in our opinion. So Better Images of AI is a project that it's basically they're creating like a stock library of better images, right? Whatever that means. And so we did a project with them trying to figure out what does that mean. Something, like AI, what are helpful ways of like visualizing that? What imagery can we create around that points at more of the things that we feel are either more essential or worth like calling attention to. And so a lot of the images we created together with Yasmin, Annaluk, and Clara are about like data labor, like the data labeling, like braided networks. I don't know, these more, the elements that we think are more interesting and more helpful to kind of talk about, and then commission them and work together with them to create imagery around that. There's tons of images. You can use them all. I'm not going to do that now. And we're working on a project now, which we just kind of started, and we might talk a bit more about. That's called Slow AI. That isn't a term we came up with. I think Timnit Gebru like coined that. I mean, she's like the first one I saw using it, which was just in like, so when she left Google, there were headlines like Timnit is starting a slow AI movement. And that's kind of like all the stuff you can find about it online, right? Like no one's like necessarily working or defining that term yet. But we think it's an interesting like frame, kind of. So when we think about like fast food, fast fashion, slow fashion, if what we see now is like fast AI, right? Like move fast, break things, efficiency and profit at all costs. What is the counter narrative to that? I don't know, that's the question we're exploring. And so it's about exploring different narratives, but also specifically like, we have like 3 sort of topics in it. So there's like esoteric AI, which is questioning like theories of knowledge, like how AI is existing within this lineage of just like rationality as like a valid way of thinking and knowing, and how could other like ways of knowing exist in that world, or maybe guide the way we develop AI, as well as, like more like fun, interesting analogies, just like prompting us, writing spells or whatever, like how can these frames like help us relate to it in different ways. Second topic is small AI, which is very much about right now the AI we see and use. It's, big tech operated, like they make it over there, and we're just sort of quite, limited in the way we want to use that. What would a more like DIY AI look like? A friend of mine, also a researcher, Vera van der Burg, she calls it like lo-fi AI, which I think is also very cute. But what would that look like, right? So AI that we can actually sort of like build and govern and decide things about ourselves. So it's both that idea of DIY, but also small as like less like ecologically, you know, like heavy. Yeah, small, you know, like who decided big is better? So we are very interested in that idea of what could small AI look like. And then the final one is ancestral AI, which is actually just who's over there, who I think if you have any questions for him, you can ask. So he's the research lead on that, and that's sort of exploring AI from a more like temporal perspective, looking at like history, future, but also how can we be more aware of like the through lines, and zoom out a little bit from the day-to-day like hype of AI to get more perspective, but also not get lost in long-termism and, you know, forget that we live here and now. So it's about sort of this temporal aspect. I think small AI is very much about scale, and esoteric AI is very much just about like how we like process, value, pass on information, and what we find like legitimate or illegitimate knowledges. And so we don't think any of these three topics are necessarily like the solution to anything. We just believe that they're like lenses worth looking through to create, in a way, like a more kaleidoscopic, you know, perspective of AI that isn't so rigid within a specific like way of thinking and ideology, but is more, plural, I guess. And then this is a project that I'm doing as a researcher with the University of Applied Sciences in Rotterdam, and we're exploring with the masters this week as well. So it's about, kind of looking at the interface as a, I don't know, like space for potential intervention, as it is ultimately the space where a lot of our, like AI is a whole system, and it's, you know, a whole chain of decisions and value, but ultimately most of my sort of user interactions play out in this like either this tiny little screen or this tiny little screen. And so whatever guidelines we have for ethical or responsible AI, how do they also ultimately like, you know, end up there in a way that supports the people that use these systems? And generally UX of AI is not so like established yet, I think, as a field, but then this is looking especially at like that from a more feminist point of view. So a lot of these guidelines are developed within big tech, and just like if we come at it from a different set of values, what could our algorithmic interactions look like? So it's more like a speculative design, imaginative project, this one. So that's, I don't know, a ramble, that's my ramble about some of the work we're doing that we believe or hope that it contributes to kind of expanding these like imaginaries and the way that we think about AI and who gets to participate in that conversation. And then this is just like the stuff throughout everything. You know, being on calls, running around in our gather space, and having lots of chats on Slack and elsewhere. So this is kind of like the glue of, you know, the rest is all just, nowhere's there on the little slide. It's kind of like the glue, because like the community and the people in there are ultimately like the, I don't know, the source and also the audience for everything we do. So there's a lot of just like that, just meeting up to exchange thoughts and sense make together. So that's it. You can come sit with us, think, work, whatever. If you care about any of these things, I don't know, explore with us, figure it out. Also, if you have different perspectives on these things, we'd love to hear from them. And if you want to spend the whole year on it, obviously do the masters. But if you just have like 10 minutes, then you can come hang with us. That's it. That's me. That's AIxDESIGN. Let's talk a little bit. Thank you. And these are our croissants. They are very important to us.
Present.
Yes, croissant.
Croissants are very important. Okay. So now we will invite to the red table two of the participants, both of the community, collaborators of the AIxDESIGN community, but also participants of this first cohort of the Master in Design for Responsible AI. So I invite Noor Koli, welcome, and Gust Nogueira. So we will learn a bit more about them, and then we will chat a bit AI design, the climate emergency time policy. So to start with, well, you have this mic, maybe just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll take it.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Noor. I'm from India and I live in the Netherlands. I have a background in completely no tech, no design. It's policy and political science and international relations. And halfway through those studies, I decided I want to really go away from that space because there's a lot of big talk happening and no work. And there is work, but not the kind of work that I wanted to focus on, which was more ground up tech focus change. And that's how I found this master's and the community both at the right time around last year. And yeah, very happy to be here. And that's about it.
Everyone. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Gust. I'm from Brazil. I'm from the Amazon rainforest, but I've been living in Amsterdam as well for 7 years now. And I do my research focused on people's relationship with time and how different cultures perceive and experience time in different ways. Related to our masters here that started last year, I've been connecting these decolonial practices with the non-Western practices that we are studying inside of the master. And this research is now connected also with the community of AIxDESIGN through the ancestral AI perspective that I am the research lead. A project that started with this investigation that Nadia was showing, bringing the different kaleidoscope of like slow AI. And on that, we also started to discuss how to explore non-linear and also non-dual perspectives, questioning this idea of like slow and fast only in time, so how we can look also to other perspectives. And this was how we started to think about the ancestral approach, thinking not only of past through the Western perspective of the timeline, but also looking to alternative worldviews that are present here as well, and then we can connect through different lenses. And this is what we are investigating together right now.
Intro.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. So I will drop a first question for for the three of you to like kick off the conversation. And if anyone in the room or in the live stream, I hope they are listening, they should be listening, has a question or also a kind of a comment or topic, we will be using the mic so that it is also part of the stream and recorded. So the first question for each of you, in Nadia's presentation, there were a set of values that have been driving the evolution of the community. So it's this idea that is shared by the master as well, of designing for the master the main values responsibility, but we are also exploring others as plurality, solidarity. In the case of AIxDESIGN, there are feminist values, there is a clear intention of the colonial practices, there is of course the importance of plurality as well. So I wanted to ask each of you how you are finding in this kind of communal practices a context to grow, let's say, to develop a practice that is driven by values, and what opportunities do you see from each of your perspectives?
I can go first. So I would firstly like to point out on what Nadia mentioned about working in the open and also connect it with something we've been really mentioning and referring to in our masters, which is the black boxes of AI systems. And with the community and working also as a community lead for AIxDESIGN last year, and then transitioning from policy where you don't understand anything about what's actually happening in the technical aspects, but more about what's happening on the top, to really being able to figure out, or at least asking the questions as to what's happening in the tech. I think the one value that I draw from would be that no black boxes, sort of like working in the open also means that you're making research and everything accessible for other people to build upon, and not treating yourself as too precious or your work as too precious, but more like it is something that is built with the community. So that is something that I take into my work as well. And I've learned a lot about making things explainable and graspable for myself primarily, because it takes me extra time to understand the technical aspects, and then when I'm able to understand it, it makes it easier to explain it to others. So I would go with that value of like no black boxes.
And adding on that, I think it has been important as well for us to question how we define the set of values and to whom we are defining the set of values. Usually we think of let's research or let's explore on the topic of AI, but AI is not a singular definition of this entity or identity that we can start to explore as a single view. Where is this place? And when we are talking about now, also in which scale of the now we are talking. So to look to all of these different values that Nadia, Andres mentioned, and also Nur, we also started to understand that the time of how these explorations are happening, they are different in different places of the world or for different communities. So it is important also when we bring, for example, the world these values are serving, or also to whom we are considering when we look to these specific values. So, for example, the colonial or alternative worldviews, or indigenous perspectives, or the feminist lenses. So to don't look to that as universal, otherwise you start to question some singular lens to try to create another singular or universal answer. And I think this kaleidoscope is also a way to understand, okay, we are doing like this personal exploration or this collective exploration of this group, or of this group looking to this specific project in this specific region of the world. So how we can learn from that, but understanding that not necessarily because it works in that specific context that we can or should just escalate to everywhere else. So this is also something important when we are looking to values.
I don't have that much to add. Great, Joe. Thank you. Yeah, I realized like from the beginning, the reason that I started a thing is because you care about a thing. You know what I mean? It's like, why else bother building a community? Sort of like, there's a lot of care and just like labor or effort that goes into doing anything, really, like organizing anything. So I think you always have reasons for doing that, like something that drives you or moves you. But until last week, Andres, we had never actually put our values on a slide like that. And we were like, it's very clear to everyone in the community, sort of like, and even around it, like how we work or what we care about. But we had actually done a really poor job of making those things explicit. So it's something we're also doing now, like acknowledging the value of sort of communicating those things. I mean, like, this is what we care about, as a way of both committing to it, you know, like for yourself and others. I think one of the most important values for me with AIxDESIGN and for myself as well is just like everything as a iteration. Like, you know, when we do definitions, everything's like a working definition. Every document is like a living document, right? It's only that thing what we understand now until we understand more, kind of. So we don't like attach too much, I think, to like, yeah, our like perspective of this moment, knowing that hopefully we will always like, you know, transcend it or expand it later. And I think just this like willingness to learn or understand more or be proven, not even wrong, but just like someone again like shining a light, being like, maybe there's a little thing there you missed, and you're like, I did miss that, like, you know, thank you. And I think that's really beautiful about being in a community, that yeah, you just learn so much because you have such a limited view as one person sort of experiencing the world like this. And so it's really, yeah, like rich to have so many people around sharing their like thoughts and experiences. And I think that's, yeah, very cool.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Michael. The question is there a way of bringing people from both extremes of the tech spectrum safely and impactfully together? Should they be meeting midway, or should they go deeper into others' territory? That's
interesting question. I mean, I do think it's really important to do that, or like to understand each other's like perspectives. Again, there's actually tons of people in the community that work at like big tech as well, but have like mixed feelings about it, and that's okay, right? And also, I do think just being only on that. We actually talked about this when in class yesterday, today, I don't remember, in class at some point, like. Being only on this critical side as well, it's a role, like, and everyone plays their role, and you do what, you know, you're good at and nourishes you. But like just being critical only, it's also like limited in what you can do, right? Sometimes you gotta like, I don't know, change things from the inside out, or like play the game to change the game or whatever. So I think there's, you know, value in all those different roles and perspectives and like different ways of hopefully making small steps towards responsible AI, however we like define that. Yeah, so I think hopefully we're not too, you know, like polarizing or dismissive, like critical. People with a more critical practice, I think, could really learn a lot from like the realities of day to day, you know, like corporate, yeah, like world, which, let's be honest, like does drive, you know, make a lot of the world go around. And the other way around as well. So I think for myself and also in the community, that's like a space to do that. How do we do that outside of that? I don't know, I'll think about that. You want to add something?
There's actually a follow-up that I missed in the comments. As an example that Michael shared is, should coders and creatives spend a year working on a farm and farmers spend a year learning to design and code? Would you know any examples of such projects?
Yeah, let's all just spend the rest of our lives on a farm. Yeah, I'm in for that.
And for Noor, what is your perspective when it comes to people making policy? Like that would be like also people on like another side of this multidimensional spectrum. What are your thoughts on this?
I think right now policy is, especially on AI, is guided by people participation, but then those people are the people who are making profit out of AI and not the people who are getting impacted by AI. I don't know how it will look like if we transition policy making to something that's really people oriented, because people also have their own opinions about AI, and it's a very complex space. I think what is needed more might be just a thorough understanding on the policymakers front of how this can impact and continue to impact people. Like Nadia mentioned, that it's a working definition, this will keep changing, and maybe just glorifying it by saying that we made this with like people's participation is not necessarily going to be the right solution, because it will still be shaped, and because AI and tech is such a polarizing space, it will always be shaped by the most extreme biases that are there. So it might be just better to really dissect it in a way that shows what is being impacted, and maybe not to consider the profit making people in the policy making, not the big companies, but that's very ambitious.
Thank you, Noor. Is there any question here in the room? We have a few other in the chat, but okay, here. You can start by just briefly introducing yourself and then dropping the question.
I am Francisco from Odd Data and Design Studio. Work a lot with like data and data visualization and stuff. In the beginning, you talked a little bit about designing fun interfaces for AI. And I think in the beginning that was a lot more present because AI was more like scrappy and not taken too seriously. As it evolved and got scale, we kind of moved away from that. But do you think there's still space for that? Maybe that would be a tool for us to bring people to those more slow AI models, think about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think like making and tinkering is such a good way of like building literacy, you know? So I think if anything, like it's really valuable for that. I do like miss those days sometimes, you know? And it's so funny because this is literally like 2 years ago, but like it was really interesting, yeah, working with these models and like you had to like collect your own data set and like train it and, you know, watch it fail a million times. And like at the time, like working with sort of like creative AI tools, you really, like you couldn't do that without building a pretty deep literacy of how it worked. Even if you weren't like at all, I was not coding from scratch or just use like ML for artists, okay, you know, and like all sorts of resources. So yeah, now it's changed, but I think we can still take those approaches. We can still do those things, even if then the things that come out are like glitchy and scrappy. And, you know, there's like a really interesting, I don't know, lots of interesting like creative work can still come out of that, both as a way to build the literacy, but also to show, I don't know, like, you know, the edges of where these models sort of understand and begin to not understand the way we understand the world. And so I think it's a really interesting way of just like engaging with the material. And I also think like there's lots of cool creative stuff we can do with AI that I haven't seen that much of, like new sort of modalities of ways of interacting that I think can be, yeah, really interesting. And if used for the right purposes, you know, whoever gets to define those, for me would be either, you know, educational or like giving these tools to like people that otherwise don't have them, kind of. Then, yeah, I think even creative AI can still be a really interesting space. But yeah, right now it's like just because of the explosion, kind of, it's a bit of a, oh. And I think actually already that's dying down a bit, so that's nice. You know, it's like, in a way, it's like the hype is already like coming down a bit, and I think that's positive. Like people have calmed down from the panic or the chaos or the total like hype and shock mode to be like, cool, it's not new, whatever. I mean, now there's new things again, but you know, like people have sort of, oof, okay. And now people actually begin to ask questions like, cool, like, how might I want to use this? What does this mean for my practice? Is there anything in that for me? Are there sort of like new creative possibilities that weren't there before? Or you can, you know, bring ideas or stories to life in like new ways. Yeah, so I'm still excited about that space. It just felt less, you know, for a little while, it felt like a bit of a minefield. So we were like, oh, it's, you know, but yeah, still excited about that for sure.
No.
Yeah, what also got my interest about it is how, if we still see space for that, how we see where we can find these projects happening, or how we can make these projects still have like momentum and attention. And as someone that used it to work more for projects we're coming for these big corporations or big companies, I see like in initiatives like the AIxDESIGN, the space for looking for create independent projects that are going to be like co-participatory as the community is, that usually they are funded by like calls and opportunities, or looking to partnerships with like foundations or universities, different institutions, even like corporations, like for example in the masters with the all the focus of like Mozilla Foundation, for example, that we studied, and they have like the Mozilla Fest that also have the space for experimentation, putting together artists and technologists. So there are spaces where these alternative worldviews can be practiced in different ways. They usually are not in the commercial spaces that usually we look for. And still highlighting like something about the first question that was, if we are gonna start to see like farmers go into tech or technologists going, like I think I entered in this master a bit with this view, and I understand now that we are creating like this third space. That is not the space in between, it's not the middle ground, it's a third thing, is a new thing that that is a new territory. It's a territory that we're gonna see people from this different background and different values coming together to explore and to participate in initiatives that are gonna be artistical and exploratory and critical and all of that together, using technology as well, but not defined in one of these boxes that we use it to define this. What
You?
else?
More questions here, Lars? Briefly introduce yourself and then.
Hi, I'm Lars, designer, nerdy, now upgraded or downgraded to innovation strategy, working at Telefonica. You made really good points about the need for being constructive, to bring forward responsible AI, or the sense of responsibility. With previous tech revolutions, we had a bit more time. So with the internet, you know, we had 10 years time until the impact really hit, and so we could already start thinking about it. With social media, we already got late. Also the impact, the tech created facts. Kids are ruined, or not, we will find out. So what are you thinking about speeding up the impact of the research that needs to be done and that is happening in that commercial space or in the space overall, not just in that experimental arena? No, but we have to shorten the time from thinking about what could happen, what should we prevent, and all that thinking can't really speed up. So how can we influence tech while we can still influence it?
Yes. Regarding this perspective of time, we tend to understand, this is also a worldview that we believe. This idea that acceleration and progress are synonyms. This idea that that in technology, that the progress is gonna be something that we cannot set apart of the acceleration, and as you said, the speed is gonna like increase more and more. So the idea of progress need this next level of speed. But this is a worldview. Again, in the project of Slow AI, or bringing a different worldview, in the words of Bayo Akomolafe, that is a Nigerian philosopher and activist, he says that the times are urgent and we need to slow down. And it's not something that usually we think, if it's urgent, I need to run and I need to do something. But when we run, usually we use the same framework that we have that created the problem to solve the problem. So how can we stop also to reconsider the route and see alternatives to that? And of course, we also look to how this mainstream worldview will not stop, will keep like accelerating. So how I think our challenge is also of how to explore these alternative worldviews, knowing that this bus will not stop while we need to stop to look to other things. We need to think of other models that are not going to be only for speed and acceleration. Yes. Yeah.
Definitely like this sense of like urgency or rush or panic, right? Both on like the hype side, which like, oh, new tools, I need to, you know, like not fall behind. Like this sense of urgency as well as like, oh my God, like these technologies are affecting us in, pretty serious ways, and how do we cope with that? Like both those senses of urgency are, very often then, it's good to a point that it like mobilizes us to do something, but also, versus like running around frantically doing stuff, which is, I think, our culture's tendency, and definitely my internalized tendency to just like run around and doing stuff frantically. I think it's like this idea of, the type of acting and thinking that produced the challenge isn't the one that's going to help you solve it. So it's like, I don't know, how can we have like slow thoughts around fast technology? Like how can we actually be, mindful, present, thoughtful within this kind of like chaos? And that's why, also with the work we do, we just like, we're not really under the illusion that we're gonna like change the world, but we do feel like while we're here, we can do something we believe contributes like 0.01% without burning ourselves out, right? So it's just like, I don't know, but a question we like spend a lot of time asking and interrogating, and it's also the reason we're like, making that actually such an integral part of the sort of slow AI research, which isn't necessarily about time, but like, it's a very, important sort of like quality and aspect of, our culture and worldview, and I think how we relate to the world. And super interesting stuff. Happy to discuss it. But I think Gust is always like, can say the thing so much better, and then I'm just like, that thing. So thank you for being so eloquent.
Any more questions in the room? I have another one in the chat. You'll take the one in the chat. Also from Michael. It's the corporate versus non-corporate narrative in technology has been on the forefront of the discourse for quite a while. So in your opinion, can a corporate environment be positive for the development and application of post-internet technology for the common good? Or is it inherently corrupted by the need to generate gain, profit?
I don't have much to add, just that I think this is, I think it's just something we'll have to see, but I don't think it's going to change because there's a race. And this is one thing we discussed also in one of the courses, that anyone who's coming from a big tech corporate point of view and producing new solutions is also not under the illusion that they are not changing the world. They very much do think they are changing the world, and they believe they're in the race for it. So the solution they're making is the best that they can produce to solve some of the most pressing problems. And they really do have that savior complex, right? So with that savior complex, I guess there just comes this race to be the next best savior. And I think it's a difficult thing to place a bet on that it will change, which is why the non-corporate discourse is getting all the more important. That's what I feel.
Other questions in the room? Yeah, of course.
A bit connected to Lars' question, when you're trying to decide what projects you're gonna pursue, knowing that things are gonna change so fast, how do you prioritize, how do you choose, and how do you frame the project so that when they're finished, they're not irrelevant and keep relevant for a while?
That's a great question. So with the story and code, like the artist residency, it was actually insane, because when we started it, I don't know, it was like a 6-month project, like residency. So we're, like meeting on a regular basis and like making things and reflecting on the process and stuff. And it's just insane to see what was like technically possible or accessible for us at the beginning of that and the end. And it's like 6 months. It's nothing. It's like such a short amount of time. But in this sort of AI space, like that is such a huge chunk of, like, so much happens in that small space of time. So I think, that was like really crazy. Yeah, like every week that we saw each other, we were like, oh my God, like what just happened? Like everything we were talking about before, it's now like flipped on its head again. And so I think in a way it actually challenged us to think more about, the things that stay the same, right? So these tensions of working with AI models, things like, the opportunity for like serendipity when you're working with these like generative models versus like the need for controlling or steering your creation because you're the artist and you have an intention and taste and etc. So it's like those kinds of frictions. They stay the same throughout all working with generative models, right? Because there's like certain qualities about these systems and how we interact with them and how it's different from other systems that don't really change. It's really hard to pinpoint them, but that's sort of what we try. So it's a bit more, it's like looking for that second layer, that's not the tool, but like what does the tool sort of fundamentally like do or not do, and what's our ways of engaging. So we kind of like look for that. But yeah, it happens all the time that it actually happens also in my own practice of sometimes making stuff, and I'm like, I make a thing and then I plan to post it, but I don't because I'm, just not. And then it's like I wait a bit, and then I'm like, well, this is just really like this is like a archaeology, like an artifact of the past now, because the technology moves so fast. But I think there's ways of thinking about, and then also, for example, this slow AI narrative. I feel like that's really important and like relevant and timely thinking that I don't see necessarily going outdated so soon, because it's more about like how we relate to it rather than like the specific thing itself. But yeah, it's a real challenge. And then there is the reality also for us of capital. Yeah, like we have to pay rent. Unfortunately, we still live in a capitalist society, and I have to pay rent. And so when you say, how do you decide what are the projects that you can do, we generally think of all the stuff we want to do, and we keep like a backlog of like things we think are meaningful and interesting and valuable. But then we write open calls and grants, and whoever, can give us some funding to not do, like a lot of it is a labor of love, but, we do have to, and we do other work and stuff. But there is also reality there of capital. And so whatever other cultural institutions decide to prioritize in a way is also forcing, what we end up working on. So it's not like we're interdependent, like everything, like not, we're just out here deciding on our own whatever the hell we want to do. But we try. But that's some of how, I don't know, those projects come to be, and how we hope that the work we're doing is still relevant, like later. And sometimes also interesting to reflect on like why it isn't relevant anymore, or so it's like also something we try to figure out. How do we do work that remains relevant in a space that's moving so fast, in ways that are sustainable for us as like a team and a community. I don't know, figuring it out. Thoughts?
Yes, some thoughts about it are also how we've been exploring that during our masters. We have a program that I think for all of us, we agree that like we are not focusing on any like fad or market trend. So it's something that we would be already like running like against something that would be outdated. And when we are talking about alternative worldviews on that, it is also about to look to a world that is not the world that it is, but it is also like the world that can become. It is like more looking to this, like we are focusing on indigenous AI protocols, or we are looking for perspectives, solar punk perspectives. These are not models that happened in 2020 or 2029 or 19. These are models that are still like yet to come, are things that we are looking for how to develop together with the specialists that are experimenting on these fields. And I think on that, we also are responsible for finding how to make these topics that are not yet here relevant to the present? How can we relate that to the message that these companies or these calls or these other initiatives can relate in some way? So it is also, which is good to study like the language of AI and images of AI, because we are also using this language also to how to frame the projects to make them relevant in the present.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question, if there is a last question. But I guess that some of you might be already hungry. So I before before there are some. Do you want to talk about there are some stickers on the table. So thank you all for being here. Especially thanks for Nadia for sharing this and like stewarding this community. Thank you, Nur. Thank you, Gust. And before you leave, just invite you to the next 3 talks that will be like 1 week after the other. So next Monday we will have the 3rd talk with Caroline Sinders, a machine learning designer and researcher. I would say one of the probably top 10 artists working in the space of
Top 3.
Of top 3, right? Top 3 artists that have been researching tech and questioning tech, and is working both in like in artistic practice, but also in institutions in different countries. So yeah, we'll be super lucky to have Caroline here next week. Then the week after, we will have Simone Rebaudengo from Oyo Studio, a speculative product designer, very nice. It's a friend, so it's very funny guy to watch in talks as well. And then we close this season of the critical features talks on the March 20 with Filippo Cutica, who is currently the interaction design director at Lego and used to be the principal of like responsible innovation at the BBC. So we will have a really exciting upcoming set of perspectives, continuing to unfold all of these topics that the group are studying, analyzing, researching in the master. So yeah, that's it. Thanks again for being here. Hopefully see you next Monday. And for those in the live stream, thank you as well.
Thank you, Andres, for hosting us, and for everyone for deciding to be here tonight and sharing your presence. And good night. Bye. I feel so parliament with this mic.